I'm Sheila Guillotone, and this is the Simsbury Woman. This program is a continuation of our last show, Resilience Grows Here. Back with us as our guests are Leesa Philippon and Justine Ginsberg. Our last show dealt with how and why the organization was formed and how the Farmington Valley Health District brought the program into our area. Today, our focus will be on the veterans themselves, what their needs are, what services are offered, many of which are considered alternative solutions. We're also going to focus on the families of veterans and the challenges they face both before and after deployment. We'll discuss some of the danger signs that a returning veteran may be in trouble, unspoken though it may be. Most importantly, we'll discuss what veterans' family members and all of the community can do to make sure our veterans have the help and support they need. Welcome back, Leesa and Justine. Before we start, just to remind people, if you would just very briefly tell us how you each got to working with Resilience Grows Here.
Sure, thank you for having us back, Sheila. As the Community Health Coordinator for the Farmington Valley Health District, my job is to provide health programming that looks at prevention within our communities, and obviously public health looks at the most vulnerable of our populations, and unfortunately, our veterans and their families are a part of the demographic that are incredibly vulnerable. So Resilience Grows Here was born from an opportunity for a grant that came from the Movember Foundation and is supported by the Prevention Institute, and has allowed us to create a program that really focuses on the mental well-being of the men and women that serve the community and the country here in the USA.
So this is not a state-based. This is actually a national program.
Well, it's actually based out of the Farmington Valley Health District at the moment, but eventually absolutely it has the ability to
go nationwide.
Totally.
Great. That's good. Leesa, you have a very interesting story. I just told you before, you are virtually the only military person I know. So give us a little bit of your background.
Yes, I was raised in a military family. I proceeded to join the military, met my husband in the military. We had children in the military. I have two sons, two Marines. My oldest son sadly gave his life in Iraq in 2005, so I am a Gold Star mother. And my younger son just completed his 6-year commitment with the Marine Reserves. So as you can imagine, I have a very strong passion for the brothers and sisters in arms of my sons. So in July, I was brought on board, and we are kicking in and ready to go.
Great. I wanted to start with something that I think you kind of cued me into the fact that is not really much attention paid to, and that is you're a military family, so you knew what to expect. But if you have a child who wants to go into the military and nobody in your family's ever been in the military, families really are not given much help in terms of what to expect, other than somebody could get hurt, obviously you know that, but when people come back and there's no physical injury, they're really not prepared in any way for what could happen.
This is very true. When you are serving in the military, you're on a military base, there are a lot of programs in place to help the families maneuver through these situations. But when you are out in the civilian world, a mom, dad, family, you can rely somewhat on going to the recruiters. They might help some, but you really are disconnected from the military lifestyle that prepares you for any of this. I was prepared because of my time in the service, but the families that aren't, it's just another challenge lopped on top.
Right. So we know that when our veterans come back and they have a physical injury, in a way that's easier for the family and probably, and I don't know, this sounds stupid, the veteran to deal with than the veteran who comes back and seems to be completely fine, but underneath, that's not the way it is.
Correct. I mean, they will be able to access services that they need either way. I guess that it's a challenge in that they do have to seek it out themselves. And their families, sometimes that can be very frustrating when they go to help their loved ones because they are held up by the system.
What do you mean?
8 months waiting list to get an appointment with the VA at times.
For what? For like...
For medical attention.
Really?
So when they need immediate attention, it's not always available to them.
Whoa.
They are working to improve that, but it's a very slow process.
Huh. Now, when a soldier comes back and has been deployed to one of the nastier places, for want of a better word, I mean, is there something they're supposed to do? Because someone recently was telling me that she had a friend whose son came back, he'd been a SEAL, and basically just refused to talk about it, refused to seek help, and obviously the family was expecting the same person back, and that kind of blows up.
There's a quote that I have. What saves you in battle can kill you when you come home.
Really?
That was made by a Marine veteran. The emotions that you have to stuff down and press on with in war to get through those battles, you have to suppress those feelings. And when you come home, you can't do that. You have to let that out. But they tend to come home and continue that same behavior.
Well, it's been trained into them.
Yes, absolutely. So it's detrimental that each and every combat veteran that comes home, that they register with the VA. Even though it's a harrowing experience, they need to get their foot in the door. That way, the benefits that are due them, which they earned above and beyond.
God, yes. I don't think anyone would argue, well, I hope no one would argue with that.
So that they can get started on those services. There are so many signs that the families can look out for and reach out for help, and that's one of the reasons why RGH is such a valuable resource in the community, because we are going to stand beside them and help them find those benefits and services and walk beside them.
Okay.
You know, I think another thing that's really important to point out, Sheila, is that the invisible wounds of war are just that. They're not there for the world to see. So when these young men and women come home and there's not an obvious physical impediment, these young men and women have been trained to kind of suck it up and be strong, and that's a sign of being a great warrior, is being able to just get on with the job. And when they come home and perhaps their brothers and sisters in arms do have physical injuries, those with the invisible wounds, the mental health challenges, feel as though they are using the system that could be used for somebody else that has a more obvious wound or injury. So, you know, people often don't ask because you can't see.
Right.
Whereas if you have a physical injury, it's obvious that you need assistance, you need physical therapy, etc. So, you know, it's kind of the onus is on the families and on the community to ask the questions.
Well, it's only been recently, you probably can more accurately pinpoint this, but I mean, I know PTSD was hardly considered even something that actually existed a few years ago. And it's only just recently, well, relatively recently, been accepted as a legitimate, real mental health problem.
I like the way that Justine puts it, that PTSD is listed as a disorder, but really it's a result, a normal result of experiencing trauma. And so it's difficult to look at it as a disease or a disorder. It really should be claimed as an effect of war.
And how are treatments for that? I mean, progressing? Are they getting better? Are they learning more?
Well, trauma never actually goes away. And any response to trauma is, again, a normal reaction. You think of any trauma that you might see, being a part of a car accident or having an assault. that moment doesn't go away. It forever lives within you. What we're able to do with treatment, and to answer your question, yes, more effective treatments are being discovered all the time, and we're becoming more creative. That clinical model is not the only approach, and I think Lisa's going to touch on a little bit later some of the other things that Resilience Grows Here is able to connect our veterans and families to. But the aim of the treatment of PTSD is really to provide people with coping skills to lessen the impact in their life.
Well, there's a stigma associated with it, isn't there?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we need to tackle that so that
Right.
we can actually begin to deal with, how do we help to get you back to as normal a life as we can?
Okay.
The same way we would treat the victim of an assault or the victim of a serious crime. We don't blame the victim. It's the same. I mean, these young men and women have become traumatized performing a role that protects this nation.
Right.
They are not, there's nothing wrong with them for being traumatized. They're actually having a very normal response, but
Right.
it's how we help them
But
to
it's
deal
not
with
being
that.
treated as a normal response.
Quoting Winston, can I start with that maybe? Winston Churchill once said that we make a living by what we get and we make a life by what we give. In my view, what prompted me to become more involved was the initial trying to cut back on the veteran suicide rates. Today, where veteran suicide rates are, in my view, much too high. Anything that I can do to, again, reduce that rate. I guess I just find that, in my experience, just being there physically in somebody's presence to listen to. It's not so much I'm going to counsel you or tell you what's right or what's wrong, what's going to be in your best interest. I would just be there to listen to. I consider myself an unofficial liaison person between the RGH organization and Tunxus Community College, where I'm a student down in Farmington, and more specifically the Veterans Oasis down there. I've been able to create a relationship between the RGH organization and the Avon VFW. I'm happy and proud to say that I played a small role in putting these different organizations together for a common good, which is facilitating veterans' health and well-being. I don't do it primarily for my own benefit, however, in helping others and in doing things to assist people's well-being and their life, it comes back to be a good, helpful thing in my happiness day to day.
Let's talk a little bit about the alternative things that that you do. So give us
All right.
give us a rundown of some of
So-
the things and maybe some stories if you can.
So,
I know you got tons of
exactly, she does.
You know you should never ask that question.
While Resilience Grows Here does not provide any clinical services, we do provide access to veteran procedures and representatives within the Department of VA. And the most important action, as I said, is for every single veteran to be registered at the VA. We have a cadre of veteran organizations, VFW, American Legion, Disabled American Veterans. They are on board with us. They're excited that we're here, and they are more than happy to help us. They have veteran service officers within their organizations that helps with claims, and so we're very excited about that. We have contact with Easter Seals. Yes, Easter Seals
that was polio.
is no. They are very
I'm showing my age.
they are very established. They are offering vocational training, medical rehabilitation, neuropsychological services, emergency financial assistance, legal services, and more. They are
Really?
an excellent resource in our pocket.
Wow.
Some of the alternative therapies that we have access to are equine therapy,
Okay.
dog therapy.
Okay, now you know I want to know about Anzac.
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 You know, I nearly
Yeah.
brought him today, but
Oh, you
unfortunately
should've.
I have another
Oh, that's too
meeting
bad.
after this. So you want a story. So when we first began, we were doing peer informant interviews with veterans. We did a year's research.
Right, we should tell people Anzac is
Is a black
a
lab.
black lab.
And maybe for the next show I'll bring him in.
Okay.
So Anzac came into our world quite accidentally when we were actually interviewing a Marine who was talking about therapies that would have assisted him in returning home. And he was talking about the incredibly close connection they had in the field with the dogs that were actually there to save their lives. I mean,
Right. You
these
see stories on TV all the time about that.
unbelievable. I mean, these young men and women put their lives in the abilities of these four-legged creatures, and the bond is intangible when they're together overseas. So when they come home, we know that there is lots of anecdotal research about dogs and service dogs working with people with PTSD and anxiety, but there is not enough understanding of why dogs are so important to have them all paid for by services like the VA. So this young man basically said, if you can find me a dog, I'll get the dog trained. So within our community, and again, this is where communities are incredible when it comes to veterans, we had an amazing dog trainer, Melinda Harvey, who owns a dog training organisation in Canton called Kokopelli Dog Training.
Okay.
And she has donated her services to train a little black lab, who is now a 2.5-year-old black lab, to work. He's beautiful, and he works with our veterans, and he also works out at the 103rd Air Wing in East Granby. He's in fact become a beloved member of the Air Wing in East Granby, and in fact is far more notorious than I am or the psychological services are. He changes the conversation.
Yeah.
You can tell anything to a dog.
Oh yeah.
And
Absolutely.
you know, he sits there and he tilts his sweet little black head backwards and forwards, and you know, we're able to talk about mental health in a way that perhaps we wouldn't be able to if Anzac wasn't in the room.
Well, I mean, we did a program. This doesn't have anything to do with veterans, but they had therapy dogs working with children, and nobody was, you know, the kids were reading to the dogs to help them. But one day, one little boy leaned over and told the dog that he was being abused, and nobody knew it. And fortunately, the people in the room. So I'm a big believer. And Pets for Patriots.
Yes.
Yes.
Do we have that around here? Because I see it on Facebook.
Yeah,
but-
look, it certainly exists, and look, there's the service dog industry is an interesting one, and there's actually another whole show just in service dogs. But having a properly trained service animal is very important to allow and to continue to allow free and unrestricted access in public spaces. Unfortunately, there is an increase in the the number of dogs that are vested and not trained, and that leads to issues within the public.
Yeah.
You know, and we have to ensure that the public is safe when we have a vested animal.
Yeah.
And most importantly, we have to ensure ease of access for our veterans with those service dogs, because those dogs save these men and women's lives.
Yes.
These dogs allow them to return to some form of a normal life in our communities, and we really need to be reputable and to endorse reputable trainers and organisations of service animals. Resilience Grows Here is very fortunate to work with Melinda Harvey, and we are very, very we truly respect the importance of having a properly licensed service animals.
Absolutely. I mean,
Because otherwise it spoils it for everybody. And, you know, when you see the magic happen between a veteran and a service animal, I mean, it is phenomenal.
yeah, I watch the Facebook videos all the time and cry every time. Let's get back to what we're supposed to be talking about.
We don't have service peacocks.
Hey, I'd like to
good.
see the vest.
Yeah, absolutely. That's funny. Yes, I do remember the service peacock. You're going to tell us some of the signs that a family should be looking for.
Absolutely.
Just in case, because you said the veteran really has a hard time himself or herself reaching out sometimes, or most of the time it seems. What should the family be looking for?
Increased anxiety and worry, feelings of panic or feeling overwhelmed, anger, aggression, sleep disturbances, depression, making plans for pets' futures and giving away personal items.
This leads right into the show.
Exactly.
We're going to do on suicide. So,
Feeling unsafe.
Same sort of thing.
Yes, feeling unsafe and needing to patrol at night.
Oh, yeah. I saw something where a veteran came back and, you know, had a lovely wife and child, but just could not sleep in the house.
Right.
Had to go out in the yard or a park and sleep outside at night.
Yes.
So that's common.
And
That's a common.
You know, I think it's very difficult to pin down what's common because it's so individual, and they each go through individual circumstances that scar them.
But you can understand why the wife getting this person back, not understanding why he can't just go back to being a husband and father.
Right.
And look, I think it's really important for the public to understand and for the families to understand that part of the being vigilant and being aware of the changes is very personal. You know your partner, you know your child better than anybody else. And where the normal starts to deviate is really when we need to begin to have the conversations early. Getting in before we have mammoth changes in behaviour, before we have that hypervigilance that truly affects their ability to function in a civilian world, we need to have those conversations and make it easy to have those conversations without blame, without shame. We need to remove the stigma that there's something wrong with you. In fact, how you're behaving is perfectly normal. So how do we help you to readapt back to civilian life without that stigma and that label, but recognizing that there is an adaptation? It's like bringing a brand new baby home. We don't stigmatize that, but man, it's an adaptation, isn't it? You know, that's a 6-month adaptation for a family to get used to having a new child in their lives. It's no different for our men and women coming home. They have an adaptation to return back. We train them to deploy, we don't train them to come home.
Oh, that's okay. That's actually a very good thought. Now, you mentioned how difficult it is to get an appointment at the VA. Is there a difference as between getting an appointment if your injury is physical or psychological, or does it matter like where in the country you are?
What happens usually is that you express a need for an appointment. And
You being could be the veteran,
yeah,
could
the
be the
veteran.
veteran's family. I mean, or
generally it's the veteran.
Okay.
Yes, and so you express a need to have an appointment, and generally, I believe the procedure is they take your name and then they call you back.
Oh, God.
And
That would drive me nuts.
Yeah, so that you could be waiting a couple of weeks to get a call back, and then your appointment is in the future.
You know, I think the analogy is we go through life as normal, healthy people. We don't have on speed dial a cardiologist if you don't have pre-existing heart conditions.
Exactly.
So, you know, you start to have chest pains and you go off and you see a doctor, and now you need to see a cardiologist.
Right.
You come back from deployment and maybe you don't have any mental health signs or symptoms to begin with. But when they start to emerge, it's critical that you find treatment or assistance now, not in 6 months' time or 6 weeks' time. If you're having difficulties, if you're not sleeping, if there's problems in your marriage, if there's, you know, drug and alcohol issues, if there's suicidal ideations, this is not something we can put off until tomorrow. We need to deal with it today.
Yeah. So, in fact, it's possible that someone can come back and be perfectly normal for weeks or months, and then suddenly something shows up, and that's when families and communities really need to be watching.
Absolutely. They come home, they have parades and parties when they come home, and then the reality of life sets in. They need to go back to jobs or find jobs. And that's difficult. That has factors involved there. They have to reacclimate to their families. They've been away. They don't understand the behaviors of the children. The spouse has been taking care of all of the details of the home life, and they try to step back in. You know, I had read one instance where a young man, unfortunately, had to make that decision and was involved in an operation, and children were killed. He returned home to his unborn child and could not hold that baby. He did not feel worthy to hold that baby.
It's almost like survivor's guilt.
Yes, absolutely.
Or moral injury.
Moral injury, that's another topic. We can't lump everything into PTSD.
Right.
Moral injury is a little bit different.
Okay.
And you know, how do you have these conversations? And this is where families and communities often feel completely ill-equipped. And one of the reasons why Resilience Grows Here has a strong-based peer support network, because who else can you have that conversation with? If you haven't experienced that, then how do you even begin to bring up the experience that that young man endured? Like, how do you have that over the dinner table? I mean, that is something that the normal civilian who walks this earth would never have to confront. So the peer support network is so vitally important for our young men and women.
Well, I hate to tell you, but we've done it again. We've done 2 shows on this subject, and we've still only scratched the surface. A quick review of the daily news should alert all of us to the critical needs our veterans face when they return home. As a group, our veterans have given more to this country than can ever be repaid. It's time for all of us to understand we need to do what we can to help. Ask yourself, what does it say about all of us as a country and a society that we do so little for those who have given so much? Thank you for watching, and please consider how you can give some of your time and energy to those who have served us so bravely. And you can always contact Resilience, and they will be happy to give you ideas. Thank you.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.